Hi there. One of the things that we all face as writers is that we receive feedback on our writing, but it can be really overwhelming to actually apply this feedback. So it's a really common problem to go to the writing center or get feedback from an instructor or peers and then just not know what to do with it. I'm Professor Saraf, and I'm going to show you a revision table that you can use to revise your writing and manage feedback. So I want you to imagine this scenario. So it's Saturday night and you've just submitted a paper draft like your instructor asked you to. You kick up your feet, you say, okay, it's time to relax, and you dust off your hands, your work here is done, right? Well, not so fast. So strong writers seek feedback. And feedback might already be built into the structure of your course. For example, you might have to do peer review or go to the writing center. Or at the very least, your instructor might give you feedback and then ask you to revise. So imagine this scenario. It's Saturday night and you've just received feedback from your instructor about your draft. You open the paper and you just find it covered in comments and you wish that you had not opened it on a Saturday night, but here you are. So now what do you do? Well, if you're like most writers, you probably feel some anxiety at this point. You see all of this work that you need to do, and you don't necessarily have a plan to do it. But pause the video right here and maybe just brainstorm what you normally do. So maybe you make a list. Maybe you just kind of open the feedback and open your original document and you start making changes. What do you do? So I want to show you a particular tool that can be really helpful, and it's a tool that I use as a professional academic writer, meaning that I publish in academic journals, and this is also a tool that professional writers in other fields, whether it's writing fiction or poetry or even writing how-to manuals or professional documents, what we do as advanced writers is we often use revision plans to manage the workload. So as a student writer, you can use these revision plans both in academic contexts, but also in work contexts, because down the road when you're writing for work, you'll probably get feedback, and you need a way to manage that feedback. So I'm going to start by just trying to show you what this is. So I've been talking about revision plans. What does that look like? So in this table, I have an example of a revision plan. And I like to do a table because it keeps me organized and it gives me a visual tool to manage feedback. So as you can see, I create a table with 4 different columns. I have a feedback column, I have my thoughts, I have the plan, and then I have a deadline and the status. So I'm going to show you an example of the feedback that I got and how I then got to this point. So this is for a journal article that I submitted to a journal in May of 2020, and I had already done one revision of it, but I submitted it and then I got this email from the editor. She thanked me for submitting the manuscript, and she describes some of the main revisions that the peer reviewers want me to do. So whenever academic writers submit to academic journals, the editor sends the contact, but the article goes out to peer reviewers, typically 2 reviewers, and they give feedback on what they would like to see happen. Okay, so I've got this long letter to manage, I'm opening it, I'm getting anxious, and then I have all of these comments from the reviewers. So reviewer 1 starts out by saying, I agree that the journal needs more research, and I see the topic as a strong potential fit. And then says some of the strengths. So I appreciate the glimpse the manuscript gives into the everyday conversations of freelance writers. However, I had concerns with other issues that I think are central to writing a publishable piece. So I'm showing you this to show you that it's really normal for professional writers to get pretty harsh feedback and to have to find a way to manage that feedback. So you can kind of go back and read through this, but I've highlighted a particular piece of feedback to demonstrate how to create a revision plan. So I've highlighted here that this reviewer said, I'd like to see more explicit synthesis between the 2 currently very separate bodies of literature that are framing this manuscript in order to understand why we might need a study that draws a connection among them. And then the reviewer gives an example. So the reviewer says there's a sentence on page 5 that does this work. So then I went down and I created a revision plan. And as you can see, there's tons of feedback. This is the second reviewer's feedback. This feedback is kind of more localized, meaning it points to specific pages that need revisions. But we're going to scroll all the way down. So this is my revision plan. And as you can see, I copy paste the reviewer's feedback in the left-hand side. I usually use R1 to say reviewer 1, or maybe you use their name if it's a peer. But let's go down to that particular piece of feedback, which I've highlighted in blue. So here the reviewer says, this manuscript has the great sentence that begins to do that work. So then my thoughts, I say, okay, so the sentence on page 5 is a good model of how to synthesize. And basically the reviewer hit the nail on the head. So this is just a space where I can kind of reflect and say, I agree with this reviewer. And then I come up with a plan. So I need to rewrite the literature review with these new sections: entrepreneurship, creativity, internet forums, and then I need a section that looks across those different sections and synthesizes. I set my deadline and then I mark when it's done. So for a student, this is an example of what that might look like. So students often get feedback that's maybe a little bit more about structure or even grammar. So in this example, the student got feedback that the paper lacks structure. Make sure you have one idea per paragraph. And so then the student writes their thoughts, their plan, and the status. So why do we do this? What's the power of a simple table in helping you to become a better writer? Well, there's all kinds of scholarship on the efficacy or effectiveness of revision plans. So for one, as students, sometimes we don't read our instructor's feedback because it just feels too overwhelming. So creating a revision plan is going to improve your likelihood of being able to use the feedback because you'll have read through it, created a plan that's really visual. It also emphasizes metacognition, which means it helps you to think about what you need to do, and it's something that you can transfer or use in different contexts. Also, a lot of times students just struggle with knowing what to write or how to develop their thoughts, and going through these revision plans can actually improve student writing and thinking. Finally, sometimes as students we feel frustrated, why do I have to do this type of writing if I'm not going to need it for my field? But revision plans teach you disciplinary writing practices, meaning that these are tools that you can use in any discipline or professional setting. So now what I would like you to do is create a revision plan. So the first step is just to actually reread your paper. You need to remind yourself about what you wrote. Then you need to read the feedback that you received, and then create a 4-column table. And I often do this in the same, if, as you saw, I got the letter from the editor, so maybe you have a letter from your peer and you create a table right under it. The next step is that you need to take the feedback into the draft and localize it. So a lot of times you'll have comments from your instructor or from peers, but you need to then copy paste what your plan is. So for example, here you have a plan and you're actually going to copy paste it as a comment in the spot where you need to make the revision. And that's just going to, again, make it more manageable. Then you need to submit and follow through. So you might submit your revision plan depending on how your instructor wants you to do this. You could, for example, submit this in a final portfolio. You could submit it along with your revised paper, but make sure that you check off revisions as you complete them and reward yourself for making those revisions. It's really important to motivate yourself as a writer. Another great strategy that you can use is you can take the feedback that you got from your peers and your instructor and your revision plan and your draft to the Writing Center, and you can ask a tutor to help you work through the feedback, come up with a revision plan, or even you can have a tutor help you to decide if you have effectively addressed your instructors or peers' comments. So this is my revision plan, and I hope that you find it useful to improve your writing. Thank you.